The wooden boards creaked beneath her weight as she stood motionless, unable to move, even if she'd wanted to. A burlap hood covered her head, damp with perspiration and thick with grain dust, making each breath feel suffocating. Rough hemp bound her wrists together just above her rounded stomach. "The child is coming soon," she managed to say, but her voice was lost in the chaos around her. Mockery filled the air like smoke from burning leaves. Someone jeered about damaged merchandise. Another voice cracked jokes about premature arrivals. A teenage boy's voice squeaked as he declared, "She ain't worth nothing, sir." The man next to him laughed but offered no correction. Her name was Temperance, and her legs threatened to buckle. The platform felt like a scaffold beneath her feet. She wondered if this public humiliation might be crueler than a quick death. At least executions were swift. This degradation stretched on, sanctioned by law and witnessed by all. Behind her, the auctioneer's voice cut through the noise like gravel mixed with honey. "Next item. One difficult widow, carrying heavy, nearly ready to drop. Built for bearing. Children, proven fertile. Property comes to us through the deceased husband's family. No dowry, no standing, no voice in the matter." Applause and whistles erupted. Temperance shifted slightly under the rough cloth, but no light penetrated. Her breathing made the fabric cling uncomfortably. Inside her, the baby stirred, a gentle reminder of life amid this destruction of dignity. Heavy boots climbed onto the platform behind her. She recognized the scent immediately, tobacco smoke that had always made her sick, now worse with pregnancy. Obadiah Callahan, her brother-in-law, had arrived. "Tell them your story, Tempe," he announced with false sweetness. "Explain how you tried to steal my brother's property and refused a proper marriage. Tell them about your stubborn pride and worthless character." Her silence only fueled his anger, as it always had. She sensed him moving closer, perhaps ready to tear away her, covering and display her shame, but he stopped. He preferred her faceless. Easier to control that way. "How far along?" someone called from the crowd. 8 months, maybe less," Obadiah replied quickly. "She's always been one for theatrics." Temperance tried to shift her weight, but the rope tightened painfully around her swollen wrists. Snickers rippled through the gathering. Even the women offered no support. Some who had once shared tea at her table now whispered about her condition and questioned the child's parentage. But somewhere in the crowd, one presence felt different, heavy, still, waiting. She couldn't see through the hood, but she heard it, breathing that was deeper, steadier than the rest. It belonged to someone tall, she imagined, someone not shifting nervously or jostling for position. Opening bid. $4, the auctioneer began. Silence. Stretched. $3.50? The baby kicked sharply against her ribs. She bit her lip to stifle a cry, using the pain to stay focused despite her humiliation. $2? Any takers? Obadiah muttered something under his breath. Then came the voice, deep as a canyon, but calm as shade. "I'll take her." The crowd stirred. Temperance heard footsteps on the wooden stairs. One man climbed up. He didn't speak again, didn't negotiate or explain himself. He simply approached. She braced for rough handling, perhaps a grab or jerk to assert ownership. Instead, she felt something unexpectedly gentle. A large, work-hardened hand touched the small of her back, guiding her forward. His other hand found hers around the rope and began unwinding it slowly, loop by careful loop. The crowd fell silent. When her hands were freed, she didn't know what to do with them. She expected him to remove her hood, but he didn't. Instead, he bent down. She realized how tall he must be, and lifted her as if she weighed nothing despite her condition. Her swollen belly rested against his chest as he carried her down the steps through the parting crowd. "That's theft without payment," Obadiah shouted. The man didn't pause, but behind them a silver dollar rang against the wooden platform. Temperance remained covered, but in his arms she caught scents of earth and tobacco, pine resin and wood smoke. Her head rested against his chest, and through the cloth she could hear his steady heartbeat as he walked past wagons and wells, beyond staring children. He carried her until dirt became dry grass, past broken fences and old prayer flags nailed to a tree. Once, just once, he stopped to adjust his grip. "The baby's coming," she whispered. "Please don't abandon me." He said nothing, but his hold grew firmer, more secure. She understood he had no intention of letting go. The hood clung to her skin like a confession. Her freed hands pressed lightly against his shirt. She hadn't been held like this since before her husband's death. But this was different. Not love, but shelter. She didn't know his name or destination, but as the sun set and the gossip faded behind them, she realized something that made her tremble. She wasn't afraid. Not of him. Not yet. And deep inside, the baby kicked again, strong and sharp, as if to say, "It's time." Maybe finally, someone had come. The wagon swayed gently, each wheel turning like the tired rhythm of a weary heart. Temperance sat inside, back against a grain sack, legs folded to one side as the road jolted beneath them. The hood still covered her face, but the air had changed, no longer thick with judgment and sweat, now carrying the scent of pine needles and creek water. Neither had spoken since her plea at the auction. She knew only the weight of his silence and how his shoulders filled the wagon's front bench like he'd grown from the earth itself. Through gaps in the hood, she caught glimpses. His broad back in worn denim, wide-brimmed hat pulled low. He was a man shaped by hard work and solitude, but he hadn't let her fall. That mattered more than knowing his name. Behind closed eyes, she tried to understand what had just happened. Not just the platform's shame, but the months leading to it. Her husband, Will Callahan, had died under a freight wagon 6 months into her pregnancy. In an instant, both he and her identity vanished. Widow replaced wife, burden replaced daughter-in-law. At first, she'd scrubbed floors and held her tongue, but when they demanded she marry Obadiah or be sent away, she chose silence over surrender. Obadiah had always watched her too closely. Will had warned him off once, half drunk and half joking. She wished he'd been more serious. The baby shifted. She rubbed her belly gently, whispering wordless comfort. A thumbnail-sized pain bloomed in her lower back. She tried not to wince. The wagon slowed, then stopped. The man grunted quietly as he pulled the reins. His boots hit the dirt, then approached. The back. She lifted the hood's edge. Sunlight, pale and kind. No crowds, no judgment. They were beside a shallow stream with birches swaying nearby, a trail leading toward a green ridge. A small cabin sat tucked at the hill's base. Stone chimney, one crooked shutter. He looked at her finally. His face didn't ask for anything. Brown eyes, weathered features, a beard softening a strong jaw. Not handsome in the way the Callahans prized, but genuine. He offered his hand without words. She hesitated, then placed hers in his, expecting strength. But finding care, the pain pulsed again. She gasped, stumbling. His arm circled her waist, not possessive, just enough support to keep her standing. Inside, the cabin was simple, a single bed with a wool blanket, a rocker by the hearth, one shelf with a worn Bible. Dust danced in sunlight shafts. No ticking. Clock. No mirror for judgment. He helped her sit, brought water in a ladle, placed a folded towel nearby, then stood in the doorway, watching with a stillness that changed the space's rhythm. "Will you tell me your name?" he asked finally. She licked dry lips. "Temperance." His eyebrow lifted slightly as if he hadn't expected something so gentle from a woman treated like livestock. "And you?" she asked. "Colt." She nodded, filing the name away like a letter to read later. As he turned to leave, she called, "Wait." He looked back. Her voice was thinner now, stretched between pain and need. "Why did you do it?" Colt stared at her for a long moment. Then he spoke low, each word weighted. "Because you asked to be seen." Tears stung before she could stop them. She turned toward the cold hearth, ashamed. He didn't console her or cross the room, but placed bread on the side table with a jar of honey beside it, then walked out. She sat alone, blinking rapidly. Every room in her life had been full of noise. Commands, sermons, threats. This one held only her breath, and that was new. She untied the last rope around her wrist, letting it fall like discarded skin. Outside, she heard Colt splitting wood, rhythmic, unhurried. Her fingers drifted to her belly. The baby had quieted. She looked at her swollen, dust-covered ankles, then at the bread. He'd left it without asking, as if she were allowed to eat when hungry. The thought alone brought fresh tears, but quieter ones. As the sun tilted lower, she reached for the bread with trembling hands and broke off a piece. In the distance, a hawk screamed once. She flinched. It was only a bird, but the sound stirred something. A warning, a memory, a fear she couldn't name. She stood slowly and walked to the doorway. Colt was splitting wood in the yard back to her. But farther down the slope, behind the ridge, she saw 3 horsemen, small, distant figures watching and waiting. Her throat tightened. They hadn't come to buy. They'd come to take. The cabin held no timepiece. That was Temperance's first observation. No clock marking minutes against her nerves, only wind brushing through shutter cracks and trees swaying. Outside. Here, time moved with shadows and light, with fires ebb and flow on hearthstones, not in minutes or scoldings. By morning, Colt had split enough wood for 3 winters. He stacked it soundlessly, moving like someone who'd learned to be small despite his size. He didn't ask about her needs, standing, walking, breathing. He simply placed fresh, warm water near the bed with a clean cloth beside it. Temperance sat, up slowly, brushing loose hair from her face. Her braid had unraveled overnight. Her belly strained against her dress's faded seams. She dreamed of her mother's kitchen, cinnamon, warm bread, lace curtains trembling at a barely open window. She'd woken instead to aching ribs and pressure that didn't judge. That, too, was new. She dipped the cloth in the basin and washed her face. Her skin felt warm and tight. Looking down, she saw faint rope burns still marking her wrists, pale welts, soft and angry, reminding her she was real. Later, when she stepped outside, Colt didn't startle. He simply looked up from nailing a new board to the chicken coop and nodded. Sunlight caught his jawline, casting him half in light, half in shadow. His hair was dark with a silver streak near his temple. His hands, one strong and sure, the other twisted and shiny with scar tissue, worked in rhythm, one compensating for the other without complaint. She settled into the rocker near the door, breathing shallowly. "Have you ever had someone stay here before?" she asked. Colt didn't look up. No. The way he said it wasn't bitter, just final. Why not? A pause. Then, didn't need to. The wood creaked under her weight. The baby shifted, a flutter and nudge. "You could have left me there," she said after a while. Colt didn't answer immediately. Then he set down his hammer and straightened. "You were standing with a sack over your face and rope around your hands. Seemed like leaving wasn't your sin." She turned away, blinking against sudden heat in her eyes. Inside, a breeze stirred the Bible's pages. One fluttered loose and drifted to the floor. Later, after Colt brought her tea with the gentleness of someone who knew what hot things could do to bare skin, she asked, "Was it fire?" Her eyes glanced at his scarred hand. Colt paused, following her gaze. "Barn accident. Long time ago." "Yours?" He shook his head. "Someone else's." I got him out. She watched him closely. But it cost you something. Colt didn't deny it. He sipped his tea and leaned against the porch beam. Some things are worth the burn. The words settled between them, warm and solemn. By afternoon, clouds rolled over the hills, not storm dark, but heavy enough to dull the golden air. She walked the small path behind the cabin, one hand on her belly, the other trailing through tall grass. She found stones near the tree line, small, rounded, carefully stacked, perhaps a child's grave or a dog's. She didn't ask. Colt didn't follow. But she knew he watched from the porch, not in suspicion, but in readiness. When the wind shifted, she turned and said, "I think they'll come." Colt didn't pretend not to know who she meant. "You think they'll be fools enough to walk onto my land?" "They already were," he said calmly. "Now they'll wait for a time they think I'm not watching." Fear stayed low this time, like smoke in an old chimney waiting to stir. At dusk, he lit the lantern. Fire flickered against walls, casting their shadows large across the wooden floor. She sat by the hearth, shelling dried beans into a pot for the rhythm of it. Her hands remembered this from childhood, remembered being part of something quiet. She looked over and caught him watching her. Not her body or wounds, but her. "They said I'd shame the family if I gave birth alone," she said almost breathlessly. He met her gaze. "You're not alone." The lantern popped softly. Outside, a wolf cried. Once into the dusk, she set down the pot. "I don't think they want the baby. I think they just don't want me to have her." Colt didn't answer, but he crossed the room slowly and knelt beside the hearth. His burned hand reached out, not to touch her, but to pick up a dropped bean and place it back in the bowl. "You'll have her," he said quietly, "and she won't carry their name." Temperance looked at him like someone seeing spring after brutal winter. Her breath trembled as she whispered, "You believe that?" Colt nodded. "And when the time comes, if they try again, they'll wish they'd left you alone." By morning, the cabin smelled of warm bread and pine smoke. Temperance sat by the open window, ankles propped on a stool, damp cloth against her neck. The ache in her back had become a steady pulse, rhythmic as a drumbeat. The baby had dropped lower overnight. She could feel the difference in her bones. Outside, Colt hammered fence posts into hard ground one-handed, quiet as always. Each swing was precise, patient. She watched from behind a lace curtain. Just a strip of old linen Colt had hung after seeing her squint at morning glare. He'd done that without being asked, like the daily bread, like checking the water barrel before she woke. Not having to beg was the strangest kindness of all. Fire crackled behind her as she turned bread in the cast-iron pan, letting it brown. She hadn't felt useful in months, but she remembered how to bake: flour, lard, salt, simple things, stubborn as memory. When the knock came, it didn't sound neighborly. 3 sharp raps, then silence. Temperance froze, glancing at the rifle leaning. By the door. Colt's doing. Placed there 2 nights ago without explanation. Another knock, slower and heavier. Colt's shadow passed the window. She heard boards creak as he opened the door. "Afternoon," said a crisp voice. Male, older, polished like Sunday boots. "Preacher Vell," Colt said flatly. Temperance recognized the name. The churchman who dined with the Callahans, who'd once told her that submission heals faster than resentment. "I'm here on behalf of the Callahan family," the preacher said. "There's concern." "She's not yours to worry about," Colt replied. Temperance stepped into view. The preacher blinked as if seeing her in a home, dressed, fed, unbowed, offended some theological rule. "You're with child," he said unnecessarily. "I was with child when they dragged me to market," she answered. His mouth thinned. "Your in-laws. Say the child may be kin." "She'll have no Callahan name." "Temperance," he began, using her name like a curse. You must know how this appears. A woman alone with an unmarried man on land that isn't— It's mine, Colt interrupted, stepping forward. The preacher looked up. Colt towered even more in the doorway. You may think yourself her protector, but you're only giving the town reason to whisper. Colt didn't move. Temperance placed one hand on the doorframe for support. Let them whisper, she said. I've been quiet too long. The preacher cleared his throat, uneasy. There's law. We can send for Judge Hanley. Arrange a hearing. Judge. Hanley sat at the auction, Colt said. Didn't blink. This isn't about the past. It's about what's proper now, about decency. Temperance drew a slow breath. Decency left when they covered my face and put a price on my child. The silence rang louder than argument. Preacher Vell stepped back, boots snapping twigs. I'll report this. Do that, Colt said, shutting the door with calm finality. Temperance. Sat hard on the rocker's edge, breath shallow, hands trembling. Colt didn't speak. Instead, he knelt and began unlacing her shoes, one at a time, slow and careful. Pain? He asked, eyes on her swollen feet. Some. He rose and fetched cool water, set it beneath her feet, and guided them in. She sighed as tension left her shoulders. You always know what to do, she said after a long while. Colt sat beside the hearth. Only when it matters. The room warmed again, not just from fire. I haven't been good at asking, she whispered. It's been beaten out of me mostly. You don't need to ask here. Later, as dusk settled, she braided her hair by the window. Colt was outside brushing the mare, humming something tuneless but steady. The smell of rain carried faintly on the airs. The table, bread and honey, had appeared again without word. She hadn't seen him do it, but she knew. That night, as distant thunder rolled and fire burned low, she sat in her nightdress and broke bread slowly with both hands. She ate unhunched, not watching the door. As she licked honey from her fingers, she heard footsteps on the porch, not Colt's boots, but something lighter, faster. Urgent. Colt opened the door. On the porch stood a boy, no more than 12, hair soaked from rain, barefoot, face pale. They're coming, he whispered, looking at Temperance with wide eyes. Obadiah's got papers. Says he's taking her back. Then to Colt. Says if you stand in the way, he'll burn this place down. The storm broke before midnight. Wind slammed shutters like fists while rain sliced sideways across the porch. Inside, fire snapped and hissed, but Temperance didn't hear it. She was on her hands and knees beside the bed, breath shallow. Dress clinging to her back. Pain ripped through her spine, sharp and unforgiving. It's time, she gasped. Colt was already beside her, sleeves rolled, hair damp from hauling firewood. He didn't panic or speak unless needed. He fetched clean cloths, boiled water, propped pillows behind her back. Every movement was deliberate, practiced, as if he'd rehearsed this moment countless times without saying so. The baby was coming fast, too fast. I can't, she cried, fingers digging into the quilt. You already are, he said softly. You've survived. Worse, she gritted her teeth. Sweat slid down her neck. Her body was splitting, tearing, breaking open, but her spirit held. For the first time in months, maybe years, it held. Another contraction gripped her. She screamed. Outside, thunder cracked like gunfire. Colt pressed a cool cloth to her forehead. Breathe through it. Let her come. She didn't remember when he said her instead of it, but she clung to that word like rope. Time slipped sideways. She wasn't in a cabin anymore, but somewhere between this world and the next, between the girl they tried to break and the mother fighting her way through. Then suddenly, silence. Temperance blinked. Colt's face was close. He was holding something. Small, still. The baby. But there was no cry. Her heart stopped. No, she whispered. Please don't. Colt said nothing, just turned the tiny body gently and rubbed her back. One firm stroke, then another. The storm outside was nothing compared to the one in her chest. Then, like a match struck in darkness, a wail. High, fierce, and alive. Temperance collapsed backward in sobs as Colt wrapped the baby in soft cloth and held her out with steady arms. "She's here," he said, voice cracking. "She's real." Temperance took her daughter in trembling arms. The child was warm, red-faced, with fists already clenched against the world. She laughed through tears, wet and broken and full of wonder. "I never thought she'd make it. You both did." She looked up at Colt. Really looked. He was soaked in sweat and rain, hair plastered to his neck, eyes wide with something he rarely showed, something like awe. He sat beside her on the floor, quiet. Then he said low, almost shy, "I was thinking her name should be Mercy." Temperance blinked. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because that's what you gave me." The words sank deep. She looked at her daughter, tiny, alive, screaming her presence into the world. "Mercy." She nodded. That's what I'd never been shown. Not by the town, not by the Callahans, not by God sometimes it seemed. But Colt had offered it without asking. She kissed the baby's forehead. "Mercy it is." The moment barely settled before boots thundered outside. 3 horses, maybe more. She could hear them circling the clearing, hooves tearing wet earth. Temperance's body tensed. Colt stood without a word, grabbed the rifle, checked the chamber. "Stay behind the stove," he said. She clutched the baby tighter, heart pounding. Then came the voice. "Colt, you've got something that belongs to me. Bring her out. The woman and the child." Colt stepped onto the porch, rifle low but ready. Rain sheeted off his shoulders. He stood like stone. "She belongs to no one," he said. "You want a fire? We'll give you one," Obadiah snarled. "We got papers, a judge, men who swear on Bibles." "I've got bullets," Colt replied. A beat of silence, then laughter. "You think you can stop this? You think one scarred drifter and some whore with a baby get to rewrite law?" Colt didn't flinch. "I think you forgot what kind of man I used to be." Temperance crouched behind the stove, staring at Colt's face through the firebox slats. Rain illuminated him in flashes. He wasn't trembling or bluffing. One of the men outside shouted, "Light it up!" A torch flared near the barn. Colt lifted the rifle, not toward the barn, but into the tree line. One clean shot rang out. A scream followed, then silence. "I hit your oil lamp," Colt called. "Next time it's your hand," Obadiah cursed. "This isn't done." "I know," Colt said. Then Obadiah made a mistake. He stepped forward. Colt didn't hesitate. One more shot. Thunder cracked. Obadiah dropped. The others fled. Rain fell harder. Fire hissed out in the dirt. Gunpowder's smell faded. Inside the cabin, Mercy slept, her fists finally unclenched. Temperance sobbed softly, but not from fear. Colt came in, soaked to the bone, and set the rifle aside. He sat beside her again, eyes lowered. "He was never coming for her," she whispered. "He just didn't want me to have anything left." Colt didn't answer. He reached out gently and touched Mercy's foot. "Now you have everything," he said. For the first time in her life, she believed it. The storm moved on. The girl they'd tried to sell sat on a floor with a newborn in her arms and a man beside her who didn't ask for thanks or promises or praise, just silence. And in that silence, Mercy breathed. "What city are you watching from? Please leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you."